All right, welcome everyone. This is On Just Restart. I am joined by my friend Dumo. He has his own YouTube channel as well, who covers Nintendo, including Splatoon, which we'll be talking about today. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. It's been a little while since we've had a discussion together. And guys listening, I put a 20-minute timer because I myself tend to take a long time. Dumo sometimes takes a long time as well, but when we come together, it can be extreme. Now, this is not a live stream discussion. We're going on for 4 hours. This is just a single topic that we're talking about together. Maybe 20 minutes is not enough time. We're already about to hit the 19-minute mark and we haven't even started yet. But I have a timer. So if this goes beyond 20 minutes, you may hear that little ring during this little discussion, so you know. It's just to kind of quell this discussion, keep us hopefully a little bit more focused here. But as you may be able to tell from the title, the focus of this discussion is talking about the discussion or debate that people are having about Splatoon 3. We just got the Splatoon 3 Direct a day and a half ago, not even. And I think there's definitely a lot of content there to discuss and dissect. And some people have the impression that Splatoon 3 is going to be amazing. Other people have the impression that Splatoon 3 may be great, but it also kind of feels like just a little bit of an improvement over 2. So basically the focus of this discussion is questioning whether this is more of a Splatoon 2.5 versus the actual Splatoon 3. Does it feel like a proper follow-up from Splatoon 2, an actual true sequel, an actual true third version of this game? And that's how I'm going to start things off. Dumo, I'm going to give the floor to you. Where do you stand on this? How do you feel about the Splatoon 3 Direct, and how do you feel about Splatoon 3 and how much progression it has versus Splatoon 2?
Well, myself and my community have been discussing it ever since the Direct happened. There's a lot of excitement. People are really, really looking forward to it. Where I stand on the whole 2.5-bit, I am not a fan of calling really anything along those lines. I've seen sports games where they literally take the previous game, slap a few different title screens on it, a roster update, and call it a sequel. This is significantly over that. We're talking new specials, a lot of new specials, new systems brought in, a ton of customization. I don't know what more people actually want in order to call it a proper sequel. And that's what I find comes down to it a lot in this 0.5 discussion that keeps happening with almost every sequel that comes out. What actually is needed for people to consider it a sequel? For me, it's a matter of how much work have they put into the game to make changes, quality of life updates, new movement options will actually change the way the game feels and the pace of the game. I feel like they have it there. What are you thinking?
Well, I think it brought up some interesting points. The first one being how we could compare this to, say, like the annual sports game, like the 2K series, the different 2K series, for example, and how sometimes they may have a mode, they may remix a mode or two, they may add a new mode that's basically just kind of a remix of things that were already there, and then it is just kind of like an update of rosters and little things like that, and then there you go, a new game. They may optimize things of that nature, but one game versus the previous year or even the previous 2 years isn't really that significant of a leap, right? I would even say if you get the 2K game of this year and you go back 5 years ago or even 6 years ago, it's still basically the same experience. And I do agree that the jump between Splatoon 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 would feel a little bit more significant than that. And, I also want to kind of touch on how you were talking about questioning how much work has gone on between 2 and 3. And if I am not mistaken, Splatoon 2 came out in the first year of the Switch's life cycle. Was it like June or July, that summertime period? Maybe, yeah, I think it was July, if I'm not mistaken, around there, in 2017. And yet here we are in 2022. It's coming out, in a little bit less than a month, beginning of September. So we're going to be looking at a 5+ year gap between Splatoon 2 and 3, which is a larger gap between Splatoon 1 and 2, right? Splatoon 1 came out in 2015, actually, right? So that's a far the gap there is less. That was a little bit over 2 years, I think, because I think Splatoon 1 came out May 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And if I am mistaken, I will correct that in the edit. But it's in terms of timing, it's very different. But also, if I'm not mistaken, the team that works on Splatoon also works on Animal Crossing. Is that right, Dumo?
That is correct.
Yeah. So
they share the same. They share the same producer, and I don't know how much of the actual team is split between the two games, but from my understanding, it's a fairly significant amount.
There's definitely some overlap there. Now, it's not cut and dry because different Nintendo developers help out in different places. Like Monolith Soft has their hands in multiple different Nintendo projects, right? Not just their own. And there's some mixing and matching there. But point is that this team behind Splatoon doesn't just work on Splatoon, right? So it's not like they've been working on Splatoon 3 for 5 straight years. It's not that. But there has been a significant gap between both games here, and yet they're still coming out on the same system. And yet we're still seeing this conversation. And I'll say that even back when Splatoon 2 came out, this discussion was still rampant. Like the idea of Splatoon 2 being more like a Splatoon 1.5. Like this isn't a new thing for the Splatoon series. There's always been this kind of debate. And I think a lot of it stems from the fact that the core content in the Splatoon games is not as significant as where it's going to be once all the free content comes out. The idea behind Splatoon is that when the game releases, there's an enjoyable base package, but there's a significant amount of content that is planned to release in free updates for the next year or two. For Splatoon 2, it was at least about 2 years, right? I don't remember how much it was for Splatoon 1, but it was not that as much as Splatoon 2. But point is, there was a lot of content that was added after the fact, and that was part of the plan. It was free content. So it wasn't like people had to pay extra, but there was a lot of content planned for these games that came out after the fact. And I think people look at that base game and they wonder if it's worth the $60 price tag. And when I played Splatoon 1, I didn't feel like I was getting shorted. And when I got Splatoon 2, I also didn't feel I was getting shorted. But also both times when I got those games, I knew the deal. I knew more content was on the way, but I still enjoyed the base packages. By the time I would have gone around to all the base content in both games, there was already more content that already been added, right? So at least for my pace of how much I experienced Splatoon and how quickly, I never felt like they didn't add enough content quick enough for anything of that sort. But I do think that's a big sort of consideration to this sort of discussion, this debate, is that they add a lot of content after the fact. So the question is the base game, if there was no free content coming, would you still feel that it's a worthy successor to the previous game and worth its price tag?
That's a really hard question to answer just because it is not the reality of the situation. Mentioning the release schedule of the updates and the DLC, if you were to go on to something like Reddit, anytime during those 2+ years that they were supporting the game, you would constantly, at least 3-4 times a week, someone would come on and say, is this game worth buying? Are the lobbies still full? And the answer was always yes. In fact, 2 days ago, they just released a new weapon kit, or they just had a Splatfest, or they just released new maps, or there was just a balance patch. So this in turn creates a marketing opportunity for the game where it's always active, it's always changing, it always looks like it's so fresh and new that throughout that whole time where they're updating the game, your potential buyers are still interested because it looks like it's still new and at the beginning of its life cycle. As far as people wanting to say that there isn't enough content at launch, if you don't feel there's enough content at launch, I suggest not buying it at launch. There is going to be more content. Keep an eye on it. You don't have to get it day one. You can wait until 2-3 months, a year down the line. It's still going to be fresh. There's still going to be a ton of stuff happening. you're going to be able to buy in when you feel there is a correct amount of content for what you're spending. Personally, I think there's going to be plenty of content for me, but I can put a few thousand hours into it either way, just the way I'm going to play the game.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. I feel like the content is there for me. If it's not there for you, wait. Like you don't have to buy in right away. And also, just because the content isn't there yet for you doesn't mean it's not a proper sequel. It just means that the content is coming. And you may complain about the release schedule and say, well, they should have thrown everything out front because that's basically what they're doing anyways. And that's what the end of the game is, what the full game is. And that's fine to say that. But at the same time, those constant updates mean constant sales, means constant new player base, which means full lobbies for years and years to come.
It keeps a healthy player base online. I definitely agree with that. I mean, it's healthy for the series because it keeps the conversation going, right? It keeps it as an active part of the community, the social media. Like, you know, you see the Splatfest events, and there's like that give and play there, right? Like to open up Splatoon 3, we're getting rock paper scissors. Mind you, there's a Splatfest before the game even comes out. Exactly when I thought it would happen, by the way, which isn't a terribly hard prediction. That's kind of how it's always been for the other Splatoon games. But we're getting it, 2 weekends before it's released, basically. And it's rock, paper, scissors. I'm going with rock. But it's just kind of like that element keeps that conversation going, right? Whenever they have those Splatfests and they have those continual updates. And I'll tell you, me thinking on my experience with Splatoon 2 specifically, I enjoyed Splatoon 2 a lot. I got it at launch. I played the beginning, I did 100% of the single player campaign. I enjoyed that very much. I maxed out on Salmon Run, which I love to death. Salmon Run is actually my favorite mode in Splatoon. And I played a decent amount of Turf War and the other modes. I did some ranked matches and things of that nature, and I come back to some Splatfest. I did eventually fall off, though. I actually haven't gone around to playing Octo Expansion. I mean to try to before Splatoon 3 comes out. So definitely, I wouldn't argue I'm the biggest Splatoon fan in the world, but I do enjoy Splatoon, right? I would say I'm a fan of the series, just not like a super fan of the series. Ultimate Splatoon 2, I fell off for a little while, and when I would come back to it, it was always a good time, but I did kind of feel a little overwhelmed by the amount of new things that were added after being away for 3, 4, 6 months, 9 months at a time. Sometimes I think there was, there's like a year gap at one point, and I was just like, wow, there's a lot of stuff here. It didn't feel like an empty game, right? And I think perspective, it does have something to do with it, because the fact of the matter is all of this content is planned. It's we know it's coming. They're telling us it's coming ahead of time. So it's not like we don't know what's coming. We do know it's coming. Yes, there's surprises and things of that nature, but we have an idea of what's to come. There are new maps and new weapons on the way, and that's coming for free for about 2 years, something like that, right? So we know the free content's coming. We have the base package. You can look at it in a few different ways. One, maybe the base package alone is already a worthy enough product for you. I think for some people, quite a few people, it is. I would say, I think for me, in a lot of cases, it kind of feels that way. But after the fact, surely it is for most. But then some people may feel slighted that they have to wait. But you could also look at it from another angle. You could look at it from an angle of, okay, would you rather wait a whole other year or 2 years to play this game? Or would you rather think of it as an early access? A very high quality, polished early access where the core mechanics and modes are all there, and they're just adding more cosmetics, more maps, more weapons for free for 2 more years. Like, if you look at it as an early access, it's a fantastic deal, right? Although some people may argue in early access you don't pay as much up front, but there's that debate there, right? It kind of depends on the person. And I think ultimately most people are fine with it because Splatoon is a pretty big seller on Switch. It's one of the best-selling games on Switch, and it's a relatively new IP compared to the other franchises that are up there in the list. Pokemon, Zelda, Smash Brothers, Mario, all of those, Mario Kart, all of those have been around, and Animal Crossing have all been around longer than Splatoon. Yet Splatoon is comparable to those other series in terms of sales, which I think is really impressive considering how new the IP is.
I think you're going to see a sales boost off of Splatoon 3, and you're actually going to be able to make that argument a lot easier. I think it's going to be reaching a lot closer towards Smash numbers by the time Splatoon 3 is done. Splatoon launched to what, about 5-6 million units? Splatoon 3 is launching to over 111 million units. Now, granted,
You're talking specifically about how many Switches are out there, right? At first I got confused. I thought you meant like copies for Splatoon. You mean how many Switches are out there available, people playing that could also get Splatoon. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. The install base. And they're not going to get the same percentage of people adopting the game, but they are going to get more people in and more people playing. It's also harder to sell an older game, as well as Nintendo has done at continuing the hype and continuing to get people in. Some people will look at a game that's 1 to 2 years old. Its main focus is online, and they won't even look into it. They'll just be like, no, I missed it. Not going to bother, because they've been burnt by other games. And that's a big deal in this whole situation, is that you are going to be able to get in at any time, and this is going to sell well for a long period of time. This is going to be one of those evergreen titles, and if it can reach somewhere into the 15, 18, 20 mil range, which is very, very possible.
I would love to see that.
You are talking now Smash numbers, and you are now talking the third installment, and it is up in the area of Smash numbers, and that is absolutely insane for a new IP.
If we can get to that level, that would be crazy. I don't know how convinced you are on that. I'm not saying there isn't that potential, but I also kind of question like just how late we are into Switch's life cycle and things of that nature. And I think how Nintendo chooses to transition to their next hardware that can impact sales for games coming out now. It may not. It really just comes down to their strategy. But I definitely do see that potential for sure. Especially to your point, considering the install base, there's a lot more active users now. A lot more people could get in on it. And with a fresh Splatoon game, pun intended, it does make sense because it's an online game, right? So playing while the game has an active online community makes more sense, right? It's more attractive to a lot more people in that way. But let's get down to specifically Splatoon 3, because we're kind of like talking about the concept of Splatoon as a whole right now, and that sort of mechanic or dynamic of getting free content after the fact. I don't really mind it at all. To be totally blunt with you, that does not bother me. I think it's fine. But I'll also say, I think right now, and maybe I'll change my mind on this, but I felt like Splatoon 2, on the surface, more blatantly brought more to the table than Splatoon 3 in terms of new things for the series. So, and maybe you'll change my mind on this as we talk about it. I could certainly be missing some elements here, but I saw Splatoon 3 Direct, and it all looked high polished, high quality. No denying there. I do plan on getting the game, but there was an element of, I kind of wish there was a little bit more new here, because we're getting Salmon Run. Awesome. We got Salmon Run last time. That's fine. They showed off the campaign. We don't know much about it. Kind of how the same way they marketed both the campaign for 1 and 2. We didn't know much about it. Just kind of an interesting trailer. There you go. So I feel like it's likely par for the course. We won't know till we get, hands-on previews of the game or reviews or the game for ourselves. But that's kind of like the way they're sort of presenting it in a similar way, right? So you have those things, and they're adding some nice little, they added some seasonal things. It seems like the accessory options and the customization options are a little bit more robust, which I'm great with. And I like that now they are gonna try out a 3-way turf war. So that's cool, but this is just like during the Splatfest, seemingly. The additional team there. It's not like we can play with a third or fourth team during most of the other modes, during most of the gameplay when we're playing online. And when they introduced turf war and the ranked mode options, I saw that all the cool modes were returning, which is great. But I also expected at least one new mode, to which none were announced. Now, it wouldn't shock me if they announced one after the fact or two. That's kind of how it happened for Splatoon 2, right? And there was a mode or two added for Splatoon 1 after the fact as well. So it was maybe planned. And we are starting off with 12 maps, that I think is a solid way to launch for sure. But, I kind of coming out of the Splatoon 3 Direct, I sort of came out, okay, well, look, there's our timer. So we won't be on the 20-minute mark, but I think we can go for a little while longer and it'll be fine. But anyway, sorry for the interruption there, guys. But where I was at was basically, coming out of the Splatoon 3 Direct, it looks great. I'm gonna get the game, but there was this sort of sentiment in my own personal mind space that, they haven't really added anything like dramatically new. It just seems kind of more like a big update. It may be the little things that sort of sell me on the game and its newness. It may simply be, oh, new campaign, awesome. Oh, an updated salmon run, which has like the Godzilla-like salmonage, which is super cool, by the way. Like those elements may sell me on it. A more polished multiplayer, right, which may have a better net code sort of running for it as well, which is not saying they're really marketing, but Nintendo has like their newer online servers now, right? So hopefully that's sort of working better too. Like, I'm not saying the overall experience may not be worth it, but they didn't like blatantly show off anything to me that was like, wow, this is a huge upgrade or this is a huge expansion over Splatoon 2.
The upgrades, I feel like people are not seeing how big they can change things. I think like the movement options, the squid surge and squid roll are huge for gameplay, and they will change the way the game is played in certain engagements. They'll probably change the speed of the game. One thing some people struggle with is substrafing, which is something that greatly increases the speed of the game, and adding a squid roll actually gives them that opportunity to have that sudden shift in movement direction without losing the speed of the movement. And that's going to be a big change to a lot of people. And yet it has a little bit of an armor to it. So that's even going to change the competitive scene in just in the way that they handle their movements, handle their engagements. And we're going to see some interesting options come from it. I feel like that alone, it changed, like that is a change somewhere in the core of the gameplay. As far as modes, they update the modes and they make changes. We already know they've reduced the number of clams it takes in Clam Blitz to create your super clam. Rainmaker has a massive change in it, in which they created checkpoints, much like they did tower control between Splatoon 1 and 2, where you have to get to the pedestal, spike it, and then you now have to repop the Rainmaker and keep going. So it slows you down so you don't get those sudden knockouts. Meanwhile, the quality of life changes are insane. And I don't just mean the customization and the locker and that stuff that's really
There is one
fun.
thing I noticed that a lot of people have complained about in the past. It's like the idols and how when they have their news announcements, it sort of breaks away from the typical gameplay. My impression, what I saw was it almost looked like it could be sort of like supplemental, like it could be like cast to the side. Was that an incorrect interpretation of what they showed off?
From what I saw, it looks like you'll be in the lobby, and in the top corner of your screen, the news will play, and you'll be able to move around the lobby. So I don't think you're going to be able to fully skip the news, but you're going to be able to do something other than just stare at the screen and smash the A button as hard as you can. And that alone is going to relieve some of the frustration. But I think the biggest quality of life change, as much as many people will be over the moon about that one, it looks like they fixed some of the lobby issues that they've had. So one of my biggest complaints, anyone who streamed the game, especially Turf War, they know that in order to get people into your lobby, you have to enter a public lobby, and then people have to join in as other people leave. And now they have a system where you can join up with people and then go out and find a lobby. You can send invites to bring people into your lobby and set up a lobby. That alone is huge for a lot of different people. The streamers, the friends, I remember taking 20 minutes and still not getting the fourth person into a Turf War match because no one in the lobby was leaving. And just to be able to remove that is a big deal. You have your streamer leaves to go scrub a piece of gear, then they have to start a new lobby and then, or jump into a new lobby, and then everyone has to fight to try to get back in again. And it's just, for a lot of people, that removed the ability for them to play in public lobbies, and they have to do private battle, which is great and it's fun and all, but you also don't get experience, you don't get the money, and then you have to do things in between games rather than just let it flow naturally and the fun of the game and just let it kind of come out. And that is something I think people are really failing to realize how big of a quality of life change that actually is.
And like just all these different little things, and that is a vibe I got, right? Like, so maybe they didn't introduce like a whole new mode we've never seen before. Like, it may be the case that pretty much all the main modes we saw in Splatoon 2 are just kind of getting their own newer versions in Splatoon 3, and that is pretty much it. But it does seem like there are a number of quality of life of changes, to your point, and I do sort of get the sense that this is going to be a more polished version of Splatoon. And I personally never took major issue with Splatoon 2, but to your point about how we can now set up our lobbies now and connect with friends and invite them in, and the whole locker system as well. Like, I was during my podcast last Monday, I threw around the idea of what if like you could like rent rooms with your fellow Inklings or friends and like share like a room together and decorate it. This locker system is not too far off from that, because you can see the lockers of players or friends of the players you play against or your friends, and you can kind of decorate and compare. So it's interesting you have that. It feels like, and maybe this is just my own perception, but it feels like the customization options are a bit more extensive this time around compared to before. And they have like this whole seasonal thing now, which seems like they're taking some cues from some modern online games. And I am getting the sense that overall this is going to be an improved experience in terms of communicating and interacting with other players and just setting up games online and playing in that way. On top of the fact that we are still getting a new single player campaign, we are getting a new salmon run. We're starting off with 12 solid maps, some new ones there, a lot of new ones, and wow. Overall it looks like a quality product. But I guess the question is, am I looking for something entirely new, or am I looking for basically just the next step up for Splatoon? And that's what this kind of feels like for me, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they're not reinventing the wheel is my main point here.
Well, for starters, on the maps, it's 11 solid maps and then Wahoo World, but just to throw that out there. Okay. But as far as like it's starting in a good place. As far as no new like ranked mode or turf or casual mode, we also have to remember that Splatoon is a lot harder to create an interesting mode for, because a lot of shooters previously, they'll have they'll have a bunch of different modes added in, but Splatoon can't just throw in a death match and be like, yay, we did something good. So they have to be more creative and they have to test it around. And then it's a matter of how do you distinguish it from what we already have. I would much rather them take their time and really work on what they have for the modes. And also remember each mode. So we're starting with 12 maps. We have 5 modes if you include the 4 ranked and turf war. So that's for every one map we have, they have to make 5 iterations of that map.
And another interesting angle to consider, right, is that they've also had to have designed the maps with the 3-way squads for Turf War during Splatfest as well.
Yes. So it depends on what they're going to use for those maps. They might use the Turf War specific map only for those. I don't really know what they're going to do with that. But it'll be interesting. But again, that could be a 6th map for basically everything. In Splatoon 2, when we talk about the competitive scene, you had to learn over 90 maps. 90 maps, once you include every map from every mode, because they're not all the same. Your jumps and your movements, they can be very different. The idea can be very similar, but all the little niche things that you need to know about, like where you can reach with your jumps, where your shots can land depending on your weapon, and how far back you have to be to actually be safe, that all changes. So
There's a lot of angles here.
It's not a small amount of work. Adding a mode is, as hard as it is to just add an interesting and relevant mode to Splatoon, you now also have to look at the balancing of the mode, the map creation of the mode, and then furthermore, the specials, things like Big Bubble are going to cause some problems in ranked modes if you're not careful with it.
And I'm clearly a more casual fan, right? So speaking on like the more competitive things, aren't things that I necessarily like. I'm not saying that's all well and good, right? Like I play competitive Pokemon, so like when I talk about competitive Pokemon, most people don't really understand that, right? But I mean, I understand the points you're making here. But overall, right, like I do feel good about Splatoon 3, right? So I don't want people watching to think that I'm saying, hey, this is just Splatoon 2.5. It's not that good of a product. That is not what I'm saying. I'm simply throwing out this idea as a conversation because there was this consideration I had when I saw the Direct. And I saw what I saw, and I was like, okay, they're not adding anything on surface level that seems dramatically new. But thinking about all the little things, like something else we didn't mention, like they have those ghosts now while you're in training mode, so you can kind of, just another little element that gives you another sense of connection to your fellow players or your friends online. That's a nice, neat little thing, and it just kind of, you know, I feel like an example of a number of different things they are adding that are small, but altogether may end up being a nice quality package here, right? We may end up seeing the most polished Splatoon game yet. And we don't know how extensive the Salmon Run is. We don't know how extensive the new campaign is, right? I think sometimes we can, when I say we, I'm generalizing here, but a number of people can see what a game is offering. And this happens a lot with Nintendo games specifically, where people see what a game is offering and they assume, oh, that's what they showed us. That has to be all they have to offer, and that's it. Nothing else. There's no way there's surprises, right? We don't know that. There may be surprises. Now, I'm assuming those surprises have more to do with what's within the campaign for the single player, what's within Salmon Run, right? How the maps work in multiplayer as well. Like all of those things, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing. And we don't know what's to come with the free updates as well, which are coming for free, and we're going to be seeing them some of them pretty early on already. And on top of that, as we mentioned earlier, we are opening up with what appears to be a pretty fire Splatfest, and we're going to get to try out the 3-way turf war without buying the game for free, you know, for a whole day on August 27th, if I remember correctly. So, you know, I think the game's going to sell itself. And to your point from earlier, Dumo, if for whatever reason what you see now or what we learn about the game next coming weeks isn't enough to satisfy you, maybe it'll satisfy you in a month. Maybe it'll satisfy you in 6 months or a year from now, or when they finally release the paid DLC options, that'll satisfy you. But this game's going to have a buttload of content coming for some time, and it's looking like it at least has a lot more polish and not a lot more quality of life additions that are making it perhaps the best Splatoon game yet. And, you know, that's pretty exciting because Splatoon's already a pretty awesome game as it is.
Yeah. Now, I've said already that I'm not a fan of calling anything a 0.5 game. I find it almost insulting to the devs and the hard work they've done. But the thing is, it is being said, and because it's being said and thought about, it's making people think about it, which is a good thing. And so I'm really happy that we're actually doing this conversation because it's out there in the community, and I feel like having the conversation openly is a good, healthy thing to be doing. So even though I don't agree with it being said, I do agree with the conversation in full. And I am sympathetic of people who don't believe that the game offers enough at launch. And that's perfectly fine. I will still stand by what I said. Don't buy it at launch if you don't believe it's worth it at launch. You can wait. And that doesn't just go with Splatoon. That goes with anything. Don't buy something that you're questioning. Like, be happy with your purchase when you get it, and know that you're excited for it and you want to do this. I think there's going to be a lot of content we've got a fair number of maps, so it's not like it's going to be really stale, which was one of the complaints at the launch of Splatoon 2. There's going to be one kit of every weapon at launch, which is so many more weapons than launch with Splatoon 2. And everything basically is coming back from Splatoon 2, plus a few others. I think it's going to be a great time. But again, if you're worried about it not being enough, just wait. That's perfectly okay, perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. You know, you are the consumer. You make your choice with your money, right? I mean, there you go. But I do feel that Splatoon 3 is going to do well. Like, I have no concerns about this being a quality product, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up going down as a better game than Splatoon 2, which was already a pretty good game. So that wouldn't surprise me. Either way, both seem to be solid games, and I am excited for that Splatfest in a couple weeks.
I'm so interested to see how that's going to come out.
Yeah. What side are you picking?
Oh, paper.
Okay. I pick rock. You may beat me, but we'll see who wins in the end.
I'm going to cover your rock with paper. I'm going to throw it at a pair of scissors, and we'll see how it goes.
My rock cannot be cut. My rock cannot... It's too big for paper. There you go. It's a big rock. So, yeah.
One thing I just kind of want to end with, I do expect Splatoon 3 to have no issue with having a healthy number of people playing. And I, furthermore, also expect Splatoon 2 to still have plenty of lobbies. So, if you're on the fence, you can wait. Splatoon 2 is still going to have people playing, and you shouldn't have any problems getting lobbies. It might be a little slower, but you shouldn't have any actual problems getting lobbies.
It's probably more popular right now and lead up to the game.
I know there's a few people that have definitely come back.
Yeah. I've been thinking about playing it recently too, so I at least have to do Octo expansion.
I've had teammates contact me, mention playing again, so I'm quite excited.
Cool stuff. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for listening to this discussion. If you leave a like or subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. But also, for sure, more importantly, check out Dumo's channel. It is linked in the description below. Check him out. He talks about Splatoon and other Nintendo games. Show him some love, show him some support. But yeah, guys, that's all for now. See you later. Bye.
Bye.